There's nothing nice in my head. The adult world took it all away. Those are the lyrics from the lead single of the sophomore album from the Manic Street Preachers, Gold Against the Soul. Lacking the punch of their debut effort, the album was described by music critic Peter Kane as being superficially competent, of course, but scratch below the surface and you'll find few signs of life. Just a vaguely expressed, bemused and bored dissatisfaction, which also, rather aptly, is a description of the most recent podcast and mood within a large section of the Rovers support. This, of course, is the Oh No 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 podcast. We're trying not to be too down, but we will probably still be quite down at the moment. I'm your host, Robbie Weir, and joining me to preview Saturday's visit from Mark Wilson's high-flying Jags, we've got firstly Alan Douglas-Munn, back for more entertainment, Alan.
Yeah. I'm glutton for punishment, I suppose. Talking about Rovers for 2 hours on Sunday wasn't enough. Let's get back and do some more. Why not?
And you've negotiated suitable time to be able to do it, which is great.
Absolutely.
And of course, we've got Leslie Maven. How are you getting on, Les?
I mean, continuing the Manic Street Preachers theme and probably also reflecting with the support. I mean, if you tolerate this, then I do not know what is going to be next.
I was really wondering if you were going to go with Suicide is Painless here. I was thinking that's maybe a bit too far.
No, I mean, I did one episode from Hokkaido and I actually got to see it was still snowing in Sapporo.
Yep.
So anytime I can squeeze a Manic Street Preachers title or lyric in, I will. So I could not resist the chance to do that one.
I'm right there along with you. A thoroughly divisive band, if I've ever found one, but at the same time, yeah, still plenty of good come out there. Ironically, I did just get the book the other day, 168 Songs of Hatred and Failure, which is probably going to be 168 songs about our podcast about hatred and failure as well, if we keep going at this rate. But anyway, I'm being too negative for my own good. Yeah, let's look ahead to Saturday. Just with yourself, Alan, I'll start off Partick Thistle. We'll spend a bit of time talking about them. We'll try and break things up before we go fully into our Manic Street Preachers references overdrive. Surprise package of the league. They're joint top of the league just now. They levelled up during the week with a convincing win there. What have you made about them since the game at Firhill, and really a bit of a surprise maybe to see a team closing down the gap on St Johnstone?
It is. I mean, only a few weeks ago we were all pretty much saying everyone's playing for second place now. St Johnstone looked. I didn't necessarily think they were going to go through the league unbeaten because it's a really, really tough thing to do in the championship. But you were looking at them thinking they just kind of keep motoring on. They seem to have slipped up a bit over the last few weeks. I know some Saints fans have said it's kind of been coming. And during that time, Thistle have just been, relentless. Not really blowing teams away. Not, battling anyone, but, very rarely does that happen in the championship. But they've just been really consistently scoring goals and kind of, they look like they've got a good bit of fight in them. I don't know if maybe everyone kind of writing them off a little bit at the start of the season is maybe helping fire them up a little bit. I'll fully admit I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be kind of down the bottom end, but I thought they looked like they would struggle to be really in the kind of the playoff shout. And wow, they've proven, as happens regularly, that I know absolutely bugger all about football. And also even the appointment of Mark Wilson was everyone kind of scoffed at that. And it was like, yeah, okay, they've not got who they wanted. They've gone for the cheap option. He's been rubbish everywhere he's been before. This is going to be a disaster. I can't wait to laugh at them. And he's proven to be really annoyingly competent so far. I don't like it.
Yeah, Les, Thistle are unbeaten in 10 at the moment. Turn of the tables maybe compared to when we went to Firhill on that unbeaten run in the league. What have you made of things so far from Mark Wilson's men, as we will call them?
They've done, I think, extremely well. I think there's a few things. They've done, effectively, things very well. that we completely failed to do in the summer, particularly, I think, around recruitment. And I don't think it's any surprise that they've recruited very well and got the recruitment absolutely bob on in two positions where we didn't, and that is centre forward and right back position. So some of that, granted, is down to the budget that's available to you, and that's not me moaning about having more money, because you've got to go out there and fundraise and leverage that money. But Tony Watt is a very good signing for this level. They're also managing to get a tune out of Alex Samuel as well, which fair play to them for doing that. And they've gone out there, and at right back, they've brought in Ben McPherson, who's a player that I really, really rated. I mean, a right back who was, I thought, very good for Queen's Park a couple of seasons ago, then had a really nasty injury. I really wanted us to sign Ben McPherson last year, to the point that when I typed B into Google search, that was the result automatically filled in, because I kept wondering, like, what's happened to this boy? I kept thinking, what's happened to him? As if, has he dropped out of football? Is he still at Celtic or whatever? And it turned out he was actually, just injured and kind of easing himself back in. And he's now another guy who's doing very, very well. The guy that's really caught my eye is Stanley, Ben Stanley. So Stanley came in, and when we started playing, I didn't realise how young he was, and I didn't realise he was actually Scottish and had kind of come through their own sort of kind of somebody that had come in from Scotland that they'd brought in. I assumed he was some guy that had come up from League Two and had been rubbish. But no, he is a guy that has been very young, and they've kind of persisted with him, and he's actually started turning in some really excellent performances. So I think Partick have done it with regard to recruitment and tactics, things that, for a variety of reasons, some of it, as I say, some of it down to financing, crowd size, some of it down to luck and timing, have done things that we haven't with regards to recruitment and renewing and freshening up what they had, but also keeping a lot of the quality that they had before. And right now, I mean, that's going really, really well, I think. I mean, the analogy Duncan had been using when we'd been talking earlier in a group chat was, it seems kind of similar to us under Ian Murray in the 23-24 season, where you just get everything clicking, and the sum is greater than its parts, and the results start coming. So no, as I say, I've been very, very impressed with them. I think a lot of that is down to some of the good recruitment that they did in the summer.
Yeah, part of that actually is they've done this crazy thing of getting in players on loan who are actually good enough to play in your first team. Like Ocean Smith's another one who's done really, really well for them, to the extent that I think some Mirren fans are actually saying, maybe we need to be bringing him back in January.
Certainly, to go back to talking about Ben Stanley, you mentioned him there. He seems to have a bit of the Dylan Easton about him, in the sense that he only seems to score absolute screamers. A bit like Easton has opened it up to penalties as well. Now those seem to be a bit quieter more recently, but he's been very impressive. I think over the last year, the trajectory that he's had looked solid, and there's potential there for them to maybe sell him on in the future. But I think a lot of fans he was one that he'd been speculated that he might go out on loan to Airdrie sort of last winter, and then it's been the case that he's actually came into the team and started being able to make a bit of a difference as to there. I mean, I'm going to really come back to a point that Leslie made there right at the start. Do you think the Jags are complete opposite, Allan, of the Rovers at the moment, just in sort of both in form-wise in terms of what they've done during the summer and where they're at, or is that maybe a bit too extreme?
They've done two things that we just completely failed, or have completely failed to do. As Les said, they recruited people in the areas that they needed to get people in. And what they're doing is they're playing a style of football that suits the players in their squad. They're playing a formation that suits who they have. They're playing a style that suits who's available. They're doing all the things that we have. We complained earlier in the season that we weren't, probably throughout the life of this podcast, not bringing in the people that, we think we need has been an issue. But also, it's been clear all season, and probably under most of Robson's reign, really, that we don't have the players for the formation and style that he wants to play, but we still persist with playing it anyway, despite not having the players. Whereas Mark Wilson, obviously, he was around last season as well. He's come and looked and said, right, we've got some really good wingers. We've got a strong centre halves. We're going to play to those strengths. We're going to have full backs that bomb up the wings. We're going to have wingers that bomb up there. We're going to have strikers in there who like to get on the end of balls into the box. And midfielders who'll get forward and support and have a dig from everything that we just don't seem to have. I would argue we have the players in the team who are quite capable of playing exactly that same formation. We just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's maximising what you can get out of players as well. And I think that, for the recruitment in the summer that they've done, and they have done well, I'd say also as well, they've started to get the best out of a lot of the players that have been there.
Yeah.
Logan Chalmers had a bit of an auspicious start in the sense that never really caught fire initially with Partick until about halfway through last season, and then became the Logan Chalmers that we know. And that
thankfully, he never has a good game against us.
Aye. Aidan Fitzpatrick, he's naturally a lot off the pitch when you hear about his backstory and what's been going on there. But he seems to have really come onto a game as well. And when you've got that level of winger within your squad to be able to play it, it probably harks back to when Dunfermline had the likes of Willie Gibson and Joe Cardle on either wings. And you knew that if one of them wasn't playing well, the other one probably was going to be, which made it a very difficult situation. I think with players like that, when you do get the best out of them, just sort of breeds confidence about the squad, and they'll probably be feeling that. They have had a few late goals within there. Just bringing in a bit of variety to add to that mix as well. Because a lot of the signings that they did make in the summer, they weren't sort of like the names that are maybe jumping out to you. They're not maybe coming from the biggest accolades that you've had or heard before. Certainly Tony Watts won the league, but Alex Samuel wasn't really a name that was jumping out for a lot of people. Not a lot of clubs clamouring to bring him in, I'd imagine. And then aside from that, it's just been all stable pieces that they've added into an already quite strong squad. They finished last season, I mean, the last 10 games it looked like they limped over the line, but then in the playoffs they suddenly come alive, and then they come up against the Livingston team who do go on to get promoted.
There's a lot there to remind you of us 2 years ago, isn't there? Well, that season where we finished second, there's a lot of similarities, other than the fact that they're so far been able to play centre halves. That centre half, they're not resorted to sticking midfielders in there yet, albeit it does look like Ashcroft might have picked up a knock at during the week there.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for Leslie. Just Lee Ashcroft, a big miss for them. Luke Macbeth potentially having to come in.
Absolutely. I know Ashcroft's one of these guys that sometimes has got a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a cart horse, but he's very good at what he does. He's a big unit of a guy who will, especially winning things in the air, and will then get them out of danger. And a very, very experienced player at this level. It's just a real shame we didn't get more than 34 minutes out of him when we had him. I think that's him just picking up on what Alan said. This is where, and I cannot stress this point too strongly, I'm not saying this will happen, so just in case I get clipped by any Partick fans, I'm not saying this will happen, but it does get challenging when you do have quite a small squad. So Partick, they've got good players. I mean, you look at the bench, they've got good players that are coming off the bench. And, Luke Macbeth, he's now got a few seasons under his belt. So it's not like we were, chucking Dylan Corr and Scott Brown in. But it is still quite a small squad. So I did a wee tally of the squad numbers before the season started. I didn't share it publicly because, weirdly enough, people get quite touchy and defensive when you put things out there. But Partick did actually come up alongside ourselves and Morton as having one of the smallest squads. And all of which is a roundabout way of saying, one, fair play to them for doing as well as they are. Two, fair play to them for keeping everybody fit. But it is tough. And, we've been there, we know what that's like. When you're getting later on in the season, when the injuries and suspensions start racking up, you're sometimes only ever one or two absences from having a midfielder in defence or a centre-back at a right-back or something like that. But, I think Macbeth coming in for Ashcroft, it's not quite that extreme because he's a guy that can play at the base of midfield, can play in defence and has done. He's now he's had a good number of seasons with Partick. He's got a really good number of games under his belt. So you're at least putting him in there, having had that experience of playing at centre-back. And he's one of these players I've actually quite rate him. I would not be upset if we signed him. I think he's the kind of player who there's definitely something there. There's a bit of potential there. Probably not as solid as having Ashcroft and O'Reilly as your centre back pairing, but it's not a disaster. It's not like you're having to play Scott Brown in there or anything like that. So it will be Ashcroft will be a miss if he doesn't make it. But Macbeth coming in is not the disaster for Partick that one might hope it would be.
And just to come back to you, Alan, are there any areas of sort of weakness that are jumping out for you when you look at that Thistle side that you think is something that might be exploited if we were in that position?
I wanted to look and say, they've not got much to come off the bench, but looking at the bench for midweek there, you had Wallace, you had Turner, you had Tony Watt, you had Macbeth. They're all perfectly decent. Well, in the case of Macbeth, decent, and in the case of the others, very good championship players that you could bring on. So it's on the face of it, no, there's a lot of strength in that team, and you can't underestimate the momentum they come with as well. So, I mean, I think you certainly, if you're looking for hope as a Rovers fan, it's not, there's nothing that jumps out about the way Thistle are playing that kind of gives you that. The only thing you get from a Thistle point of view, really, that gives you some hope is that they've not won at Starks Park in the league for about 15 years.
Yeah. That was got to be a point that was getting mentioned. It's a tough one because naturally the confidence just builds. We saw it particularly that first season with the new board in and Ian Murray's second season where, we were going into games and you always had that confidence, like, surely we can't do it again, but we probably can go and get another late goal. And it was naturally a fun thing to be watching Rovers, but it just kind of naturally thrives. It's one where it's almost organic and you can't really put a price on it at a club when you get that
you
environment.
Have belief as a... Like, how many times watching Rovers that season, we would go 2-1 down and you're just like, yeah, we can come back for this. Like, whereas other times, even things like the Thistle game, the one that was on the TV, the 4-3 game where, we were 2-0 up and ended up 3-2 down. Normally, as a fan base, you're absolutely raging if that happens. We're all just like, we can still win this. It just you just get so much belief as a fan base. There was so much belief in the team. So they must be going to work every day, absolutely buzzing. And I mean, you're then looking at, I don't know what the kind of status is on their injured players, but they've got Robbie Crawford, Scott Martin and Dan Mackay to come back into that team as well. If they get them fit and keep the rest of the squad fit, that's... Plus, obviously, if they have another tranche of investment in January to help bring a few players in, which, you know what, they probably will if they're still challenging at that point. There's no reason they can't go and get something else and really put a challenge in.
Yeah, it's... I guess it's a thing for boardrooms across the country where at this level of football, if you are in that position, and we've seen it before ourselves, certainly with some of the deals that were made in that Ian Murray season, I know he had 3 seasons, well, 2 and a bit seasons, but it's you look at the decisions that are made at points like that, and I know that we brought in Rudden and Turner and Ashcroft as well, technically speaking, at that, but you can see why it's one where clubs will weigh up and sort of look at it and say, actually, now's the time to pull the trigger. I certainly know that Morton had mentioned, we should be looking to go for 4th spot, and if we are in 4th spot at Christmas time, we'll add an extra investment to try and make sure that we have. Doesn't look like it's transpired so far, but you never know where runs come from and how clubs will perform.
I'd be very surprised if, with hindsight now, the Rovers board don't look back and think, man, we should have given Dan O'Reilly whatever the hell he wanted to get him back.
Exactly.
I'm not saying it would have made any difference, but we still went through most of the rest of that season with Scott Brown and playing defence for a lot of it. Again, I'm not saying having Dan O'Reilly in there would have made any difference at all, but it wouldn't have hurt. Other than maybe the budget side.
Have him. It would have meant he didn't then go to another team and then cause us all kinds of pain and misery in subsequent seasons. I was just going to say, I mean, it is difficult. You kind of get sucked into those counterfactuals. If we'd done X rather than Y, if we'd not done this, then it does think things don't always work like that. But you do sort of wonder. I mean, he was a quality player. I mean, it weirdly enough, and I think we might come on to talk about recruitment later. Weirdly enough, though, the defence is actually an area where we have materially improved things almost to a man since the Ian Murray season. So, we've brought in a better keeper. We've got, sorry Graham, a better left back. We've got better centre backs. We've got a better right back if we don't need him. So we have actually ended up in a better place even without having, extended Dan O'Reilly. And again, it wasn't for lack of a centre back necessarily that we ended up getting thumped 4-0 by Ross County in the playoffs. But no, you're right. And it does just make you think about these decision points that you come to in a season.
This thing, it's very easy to look back and say, his last game for us, he scored 2 goals at East End Park. And then after that, he left and we went on a long run without a win. Absolutely, that one thing, it doesn't mean that was what caused it. But, it's just, who knows what that. But as I say, I don't think it would have made any difference. I think we'd have still been in the Championship the following season. But
yeah, I mean, I suppose you don't really know the knock-on effects as well, because, I mean, if it means that we get Dan O'Reilly, but then we don't sign Paul Hanlon, for example.
Yeah,
then,
no, absolutely.
It's such a hard one to gauge, that you get so much as well. And it
probably emphasises actually just how difficult it is for clubs to make that decision in January. It's like you don't know. You could say, right, we're going to throw money at this guy and we're going to bring him in and really go for it. And he gets injured first game, or he comes in and then someone else gets injured. And you're still there. So I'm glad it's not me making the decisions.
I mean, over the years, you have seen some really big moves in the January window. And I'm pretty sure Brian Graham was a January signing for Thistle when he first signed for them. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he was in that sort of bracket as well. Certainly with Thistle, to go back to them, just a sort of final couple of points. Leslie, is it too simplistic to sort of pinpoint Chalmers and Fitzpatrick on the wings as being like the key danger men? Both of them, as said before, having really positive starts to the season.
Not at all. It's not. I think it absolutely a lot of their success does come down to the quality that they have on both wings, and it becomes then very hard to sort of double up on both sides or watch both of them at once if you've got guys who are able to deliver or cut inside and are not afraid to get a shot away, which is true of both Chalmers and Fitzpatrick. It absolutely is going to be a huge source of danger. The fact that they're, as I say, they're not afraid to hit the byline and get crosses, and they're not afraid to come inside sometimes, they're not afraid to take shots. They'll do all these things. And when you've got that coming in from both sides, it does make things very difficult. Again, just to pick up on what Alan was saying before, Ossian Smith has had a cracking start to the season. He's been popping up with goals as well. So they've got goal threats coming from other areas of the pitch. Weirdly enough, somehow, you kind of wonder if Thistle are actually more dangerous without Brian Graham. And so I'm going to go off on a big tangent. People are going to be, piss off, Les is talking about Japan again. So
I'm going to be delighted because I'm watching a run time and I'm like, come on, we've got 2 hours to catch up here.
The team I shout for in Japan, Iwaki FC, we've had this boy Kaina Tanimura for the last couple of seasons. And the boy bangs goals in for fun. And sitting 19th out of 20th in the league, thinking we're going to get relegated. And then a team in the top league came in and picked him off. And I'm thinking, right, that's it. We're done. We're going down. And the team has been unbeatable since then. I mean, seriously, they've lost 3 games out of 20 since then. It's because you've taken a guy out that it's the easy option. You pass to that boy and then he'll make a goal happen out of nothing. I mean, we've been guilty of that maybe with Lewis Vaughan at times. You've got a guy who's that good at scoring. You just aim for a lighthouse and let him do the rest. I wonder to an extent if there's an element of that with Partick. And I wonder maybe if it's a dressing room thing as well. I don't know. I just wonder, you've suddenly taken the guy that's doing everything out of the picture. You're taking the guy that is scoring, the guy that was managing, the guy that was also leading the women's team, the guy that was doing all these things at once out of the picture. Whether that means everybody else is stepping up a bit more, whether it changes the dynamic in the dressing room, I mean, we all know when you see Portugal what it's like with Ronaldo, and it's almost, I think it must be written into the Portuguese constitution that Ronaldo has to get first refusal on every shot, every pass, every set piece. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I just wonder if actually somehow taking Brian Graham out of that equation has freed things up within Thistle that's allowed other people to kind of step up and maybe do things that they weren't before. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say you're absolutely right. And I think Thistle fans themselves would be the first to acknowledge that. They love Brian Graham to bits. Maybe not as much as Chris Doolin, but it was one where certainly, even listening to Draw, Lose or Draw, that was a conversation they were having in the summer where they were saying, actually, I think we're going to get more from the sum of our parts. And as well, even harking back to that game at Firhill, you had Tony Watt sort of getting his goal, but immediately acknowledges Fitzpatrick or Chalmers, can't remember which one it was, but he acknowledges straight away, points him in front of the sort of Thistle's Ultra end that they have at Firhill, pointing to him saying that was all his work. And they were saying, you would never get that with Brian Graham. It would be running off, full celebration, enjoying his goal, and doing the job that Brian Graham does. But yeah, I think that's a fair statement to make, that they're probably a bit more dangerous now because they've got more of a threat across their team. They're not trying to filter it into a player that's going to be... I know that he's naturally sort of attracted to the glory, shall we say, in the spotlight, Brian Graham, but just having that... And I think that probably wouldn't surprise me if it feeds through where he's probably ruled, because he's such a determined winner, Brian Graham, and he's so good at what he does that then feeds through into sort of like if he was in the dressing room giving players a dressing down because they've not played him a ball or a pass. But again, this is all speculation. Yet you would think that based on what you can see with your evidence and your eye, eyeing up the pitch and watching him and the way that he plays and how Thistle are now, maybe they're playing with a bit more freedom. What are your thoughts on it, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it was always, there was so much reliance on him for their goals, which obviously feeds into him. He would have, I say all this, I've never met the guy. He might be a lovely guy for all I know, but he played football like he has an ego, and maybe you need that. I don't know, but there was certainly, it came across that he knew how important he was, and for a lot of it, you wonder how much it was get the ball over to Brian Graham. Whereas now they don't necessarily have that, and there's a lot more. A lot more. It's a lot more important for the rest of the guys to be contributing, and whether it's with goals or assists, and it's no coincidence that the goals are coming from. They're being spread out, and it's largely folk are not thinking, right, how can I get the ball to Brian to score? It's like, right, how can I score, or what's he doing with it? So it's changed the dynamic of the club. You'd argue that we just slight shift towards Logan Chalmers just because he's the one who gets talked a lot about on the radio. You listen to Sports Sound on a Saturday, and especially if it's Ian McCall. I don't know if Ian McCall's his agent or something like that, but he absolutely loves Logan Chalmers and loves to talk about him. And fair enough, the guy's having a very good season. And it just lets guys like Fitzpatrick go quiet about their business. Ben Stanley's not really been getting talked up yet, but as Les said, he's having a very good season. So there's it's definitely, this will seem a different team. They seem more resilient now in terms of, previous seasons. It's like, if Graham gets suspended or injured, where are the goals going to come from then? Now it's like, crap. It's like, okay, one winger's out, they just bring Wallace in instead. Or, if Dan Mackay comes back, it's like, we'll just bring a winger with plenty of Premiership experience in instead. It's like, great. So they don't seem anywhere near to being as reliant on a single player as they were. And that's maybe a wee bit harsh to the rest of the team until when Graham was there. They still had some very, very good players. But, Brian Graham, it did seem that if Graham's not going to score, who is? Whereas now it's not an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could look back at the 3-0 win that we had at Starks Park because Brian Graham was suspended, and then they've got to try and change things up, and you're using Terry Abladi, was it, as their sort of out and out striker that day. Just
the weirdest thing about that is that Graham was suspended because he got a yellow card for talking back to the referee.
Who would have thought?
Who would have known?
Anyway, right. Before we get on to Rovers, Leslie, I can see you're itching, waiting to get it to say your piece following Friday night. Before we do that, a couple of points. Firstly, Danny Lennon, bizarrely the third managerial casualty of the season, but also the second at Airdrie. Alan, just to come back to you, what were your thoughts on that? Not really much of a surprise given the circumstances, or were you a bit shocked given that you maybe thought you might have got a bit more time?
It's a bit of a surprise to see a team pull the trigger so quickly after appointing someone. I mean, I suppose you could argue Dunfermline did it last season with Thistle. They brought him in and went, yeah, this just isn't working. I think that the difference there was Thistle was quite a popular appointment. Dunfermline fans were quite excited about him. Airdrie fans were really pissed off as soon as Danny Lennon got the job. They weren't happy about it. They've done really, really poorly. Although I think someone did put in the group chat that their goals for and against is very similar to ours during that time, except they've got like 1 point or 2 points during that time. And I think we had 7, which was just bizarre. But yeah, they just never really got going. The fans were really unhappy, and some would say, "Oh, they could have given him a window." But I think what they've actually thought is, you know what, we've got this wrong. Let's make sure we get the right guy in and give him the window instead.
Yeah,
whether he's got any money to bring anyone in is another matter. But
it's just such an odd appointment. I mean, so I remember listening on the first day of the season when Danny Lennon was in the Wraith TV commentary booth with Davey Hancock, and he was brilliant. He was so sharp. He was kind of really sort of aware of who the players were in the division, and kind of about tactics and things like that, and how tactics had evolved and how the championship had evolved. But it had been so long since his last managerial job, and it had been at a much lower level, that you think, I mean, he's a fantastic ambassador when we've had him doing the cup run stuff. He's been a fantastic ambassador. He's the kind of guy you'd probably quite happily have in a technical team if you had that set up. Even just somebody he's got that experience, who clearly, as I say, keeps himself up to date, keeps his head in the game. You'd be quite happy to have him in your technical team or in a kind of ambassadorial role. You wouldn't even want him as the manager of a championship team in 2025. I don't think it just seems like quite a weird appointment in the first place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I didn't. I mean, particularly with his time with Airdrie or his time with Clyde, got them promoted. But I think it coincides with a lot of obviously stuff that's been well spoken about before, and who they had involved and what was going on at that situation. But it just tailed off quite significantly very quickly, and culminated with them going back into League Two. It seemed so out of the blue, and it's hard to see where Airdrie will go next. As their next appointment, whether they can get Ian Murray back in the door, whether they're looking at James McPake potentially, who knows? Because the Danny Lennon curveball was so left field that nobody expected it. So you're kind of almost thinking, well, are they going to do that again, or are they going to play it a bit safer next time and maybe get someone push the boat out, as you say? So time will tell.
They'll appoint a new manager just in time for a new manager bounce against us on the 15th or whenever it is.
Would not surprise me, Alan. I think you're probably absolutely right there. There is going to be a collection on Saturday prior to the game against Partick Thistle on behalf of the Community Foundation, I believe, and pasta and rice for Kirkcaldy Food Bank. So if you've got the opportunity to be able to donate, obviously go to Morrison's before the game if need be, and you'll be able to drop it off. And as ever, there's sort of collection points outside the ground for a great cause. So fingers crossed that they can get a good amount there. Leslie, let's get on to it. What were your takeaways from last Friday? Don't feel that there's any pressure or any time restraint on you. Just feel free to ad lib.
It was deeply concerning on a number of levels. And I think on reflection, on balance, the thing that maybe alarms me most is it's been a very long time since we've had, I guess, such widespread, I guess, anger actually among the fan base directed at the manager on the basis of performances. And, I think it's the thing that got me. I watched the game at home and, I was hearing from folk who were there in the stands. Obviously you've got the usual quote unquote moon howlers who will boo anything, but actually the feeling was that it was quite widespread. But then, you had, and I won't name names, but you had, let's just say, people that you would think of as being quite level-headed and sensible, kind of saying that they really weren't impressed. I think the one that really got me as well, my dad is extreme. I said I wasn't any people. I'm going to call my dad out. I'm going to use him as an example. He's really, really level-headed. Like, anytime you try and complain to my dad about bad stuff that you've seen, he tells you about seeing us lose to Peterhead away in the early 80s and the bus getting stoned on the way home. I was at Peterhead in the early 80s. Anyway, so I'd mentioned to him something during the week about being concerned that I thought Robson had lost the dressing room or something, and he says, don't be daft. Full time went, I just got a text from it, just said, I think you might be right about Robson. I was like, oh, right, that's interesting. So, the other thing as well that I think is concerning is the fact that we didn't get a reaction in the Pars game. So an analogy, if you go back to last season, Neil Collins didn't set the header alight when he was our manager. But we had that game where we lost 3-0 away to Falkirk. And he came out and he did an interview and he was visibly angry. I think you could actually literally see the steam coming off him because he'd come out the shower. But, and it was, I don't remember the exact words, but it was a very short interview. And he just said, that wasn't good enough. I know it wasn't good enough. The players know it wasn't good enough. We've let ourselves down. We've let the supporters who've travelled down, and we've got to be better. And he really didn't say it. It was like a minute or something. And then we came out and we gave a really good performance against Dunfermline. That was the game where Jack Hamilton refused to come off. So clearly Collins had ripped into them. And, you got a reaction. And we did not get that with Robson. And, it was concerning to see that. And I think, again, as I say, I was thinking back, Murray had a lot of credit in the bank. And, when we had some poor games with Ian Murray, but nobody was calling for his head. Collins, I think, started with a bit of credit in the bank and a realisation that he hadn't been dealt an even hand. McGlynn, in the last season, I think that was like the game we lost 4-0 to Ayr in John McGlynn's last season. There was a lot of anger, but it was because of what had happened. We don't need to kind of go into that. And it actually dissipated fairly quickly. We won the Challenge Cup and it actually dissipated. And by the end, we were fairly split and whether we wanted to stay or not. You probably have to go back to, I don't know, Barry Smith, certainly Hughes and Locke, to find that kind of level of anger being directed towards a manager on the basis of a performance. So, I think the other thing to say, just to be clear, I don't think that the players get away without blame. I don't think the players get away without blame for that. There's a lot of guys, particularly further up the pitch, who've been underperforming for quite a few weeks. But I do take the point that Duncan had made in a couple of the post-matches that, they're not necessarily being given the platform with regards to formation or setup that they need to perform well. And I think the final thing, just because I can see, I'm probably taking full liberty of being told there was no time limit.
No, carry on.
I'm not going to say they've lost the dressing room because I don't think it's always as simple as a team losing a manager losing the dressing room. There's a very funny Brian's gun, by the way, on Twitter of they lost the dressing room. It's got Dion Dublin going round houses, but check that out if you can. But I was watching both the Ayr game and the Dunfermline game. And at points, you're not thinking this is a team that's lost the dressing room. This isn't a team you didn't see guys arguing with each other. You didn't see the sort of signs that you might see if there had been a big bust up. But I was watching that and at points I was thinking, this is a group of players that have stopped listening to the manager, or have, more to the point, have stopped kind of believing what the manager says. And, there's concerning things like seeing guys like Paul Hanlon shelling the ball up. Is that because nobody was coming for it? Is that because they couldn't see what to do? Is that because they just weren't listening to what the manager was kind of trying to tell them anymore? There's concerning signs there, I think, that the team, I wouldn't say they've down tools. I wouldn't agree with any assertion that the team's down tools or that they're willfully trying to get Robson sacked. But there's just little concerning signs there that have stopped believing in what the manager tells them to do. As regards what happens next, I don't know. I don't think he will be sacked if we lose to Partick, unless we get thumped, unless there's a Rami in the dressing room or something like that. I don't think he will be sacked, but it is clear that he's under very serious pressure. The last manager to be sacked after losing a goalless draw at Starks Park against Morton was Gary Locke. Some concerning similarities there with regard to how well the season started. And let's not just talk about where it might go thereafter. But I think Partick, we need to see a recognition that things have got to change. I do, like you guys were saying in the post-match, I take all your points that Robson is not stubborn. He has been trying different things. But I do think it is reasonable to say that he has been wedded to certainly a formation starting from the defence, starting with the back three and wing-backs, that does not play to the strengths of the players that we have available and that are on form at the moment. Let's say players on form, that's not right, because nobody's on form. Does not suit the strengths of the players that are least not on form. I think it will be quite telling. He could almost be, the atmosphere of Saturday afternoon could be determined when the team sheet comes out, as much as anything else. If it starts Ray, Stevenson, Rowe, Hanlon, Fordyce, Doherty, then I think you're on a hide nothing from there. So, yeah, it's the first time I think since we've started this podcast we've had a manager who's been under significant pressure. And it's also probably the first time, as I say, for quite a while that we've had a manager that has been under pressure from quite a wide section of the support. So I will stop there because this is not the Leslie and Allan monologue.
I was just going to. I know the directors do occasionally watch this, and it's just with your comparison to the Gary Locke season, I'm just going to remind them of Blair's threat that he will burn Starks Park to the ground if you appoint John Hughes, and he meant it.
Well, we could all be doing with avoiding that, but I think that, look, I'm one that's loath to criticise players, sort of platforms like this, because I think especially when you do a podcast, it's with people might think that it's maybe cowardly, but your words do carry a degree of weight because there's a degree of gravity. Things can get shared, things can get clipped, but I think that it's the criticisms that were there after Friday, particularly again on the podcast and everything that's been shared, completely justified. I think that it's, like you rightfully say, Les, you come to a derby and that's the perfect opportunity to turn things around, and I just don't think we saw it at all. And how much of that's down to where you attribute your blame? It's got to have sections where every section's going to be, whether it's the management, the system, the players, there's going to be faults in all of them there. Alan, I think yourself, Duncan and Blair did a really, really good job in the post-match podcast of sort of dissecting it, because it's,
and Scott.
Yeah, and Scott as well, because it's so hard in the sense that it's really difficult to sort of determine a root cause in a situation like that. Mm-hmm. And I think there is lots of elements. It's just, you look at the stats for where we're at so far in the season. So we've played 11 games so far. So we've scored 10, which is one of the lower numbers in the league. Conceded 12, which is, I mean, other teams like Arbroath have conceded 18, Ayr have conceded 11, Morton 11,
conceded a lot.
Queen's Park, County, Airdrie, of course, all conceding more. But it's just the lack of direction that gets me. And I think that's Friday night was the first time where I've actively thought, like, normally I'd like to think I'm pretty, like, again, people might see it as cowardly, but I'm pretty, like, I'll try and take a step back, and then after a day or two I'll be like, okay, but what's really going on? Like, do you think this is, whereas Friday, the reaction was so visceral from within the support, it was almost ubiquitous, that it was just this cascade in terms of the fury, which, again, you go into a derby, you lose it in such a manner where the performance was really tepid and nobody really stood out. It looked like we weren't ever really going to be getting on the score sheet, and you're seeing chances getting squandered in a sense of we're getting the ball into the box, but we're just doing nothing with it. And even then, that became rarer and rarer as we went more and more direct. It does make it really tough, and particularly not to try and cry for sympathy, because ultimately we're just jobbers on a podcast, but you want to go into these games against the likes of Thistle, you want to be talking about pre-match, and you want to be going into your season full of hope, full of optimism, and saying, look, we want something to cheer about, we want something to be sort of saying, look at how well we're doing, look at how Rovers were performing, and I think that's the difficulty. So to talk about the game itself, Alan, do you think the performance in itself becomes a factor for Saturday? Or if we get a win, does that offer a degree of respite? Do you think a win would not be enough if the performance wasn't necessarily there?
If, ordinarily you're sitting there going, I don't care if we get a winner of that, it hits off Macbeth's arse in the 94th minute and go in, and we've played absolutely terribly. We've not created a chance all game, but we get a 94th minute winner. Nobody cares. I don't think that's the case. I think that'd be the first time ever that a team's been booed off after winning a game. I think the importance, the performance on Saturday is genuinely really important. I think we have to. Genuinely, if we play really shite and win 1-0, I think the reaction would still be worse than if we played really well and maybe narrowly, a draw or even a narrow defeat. It's all about the performance and what the team do, and just looking like we're going to create chances and compete in these games. I mean, I'm probably being ridiculous here. Obviously, you're going to be happier with a win, although maybe some people wouldn't be. I think some people will probably be quite happy if we lose, if it means Robson's one step closer to the exit. But I think it's not just as simple as we have to win at all costs. We have to put a performance together. I think the whole lost to dressing room thing is a bit of a, we do like to talk about football cliches. That is very much one. But Leslie hit the nail firmly on the head with it. It's little things like the players not playing the same way they used to, because you wonder, are they second guessing the manager? Are they thinking, is this really what we should be doing? Dylan Easton's obviously supposed to be one of the front men. He's coming back to pick it up because he's not getting the ball to him. So it's kind of, they're just not doing what they're being sent out there to do. And I think what we need to see is a team that go out there who are all singing from the same hymn sheet. They all clearly know what they're doing. They're organised. They're aggressive. They're tackling hard, but also getting forward and creating chances and hopefully scoring some of them. If we don't get that, it's going to be really tough to see the fans getting on board. And even if we do get that, I think it's only respite. If we then go back to shite against Morton next week, what was the point?
Yeah. And Leslie, to come to you, it probably begs the question, how hard do you think it is now, if at all possible, for Barry Robson to be able to shift the tone and to sort of get people back on side?
This is where it gets really challenging, in that there's a lot of people who were sceptical of Barry Robson probably till quite recently, and it hasn't taken a lot to shift them back. And you kind of think, again, just to go back to last season and Alan's point about playing dreadfully and winning. I'm remembering the Queen's Park game at Hampden and Neil Collins' last game, where we didn't know Neil Collins was in civvies because he'd already handed his club gear back to get the first flight to California. That's actually not. I don't think that's true. That's not true. But the point was, that was the game we won 2-1. Lewis Jameson scored a penalty that was so bad it should have got football stopped. And And you're kind of thinking, okay, we've got 3 points, and pragmatically, in that case, you're happy with it because it's taken us away from the relegation zone. But you're thinking there's a lot of unresolved issues there, and I think that how you then turn that round with regard to performance is very difficult. It's also like we were saying, there's a perception there about stubbornness, which isn't true, but in some ways it maybe kind of is with regards to not playing players in the positions that they have been, and how willing we are to change, particularly from a back 3 to a back 4. I do think, though, conversely, I think in Scottish football over the last few years, we have actually become, I think, a little bit more lenient with managers. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. So it's not like the English Premier League where guys are in charge for a month, and if they lose 3 games in the row, it's out, they're sacked. There's good examples
Danny
in the last
Lennon
few
might
years.
beg to differ.
One, for instance, being David Gray at Hibs. I was going to say Danny Lennon, having just said that, Danny Lennon is the example that springs to mind. But, guys like David Gray at Hibs, for instance, and we've even seen cases where Dougie Imrie at Morton has gone on bad runs, and Scott Brown at Erie thinking, he can't be far from being out the door. Chris Doolan, even at Partick. But then actually, something clicks, something turns round, and then you start kind of coming back up the league. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's a very long road back. I don't like it. I don't like the situation, and there are shades of what happened with Ian Murray here. I don't like to think there's a situation where the board are effectively sitting, waiting to pull the trigger on a manager. I'm not saying they are, because, we have no idea what they're thinking. We've no idea what the board are thinking or what they've maybe been saying to the manager. But that feeling that a manager's a dead man walking, it's not a very nice feeling when you just kind of think, this guy's beyond the point of redemption, and you're just looking for an excuse to empty him. I hope that's not the case. But it's very hard to see a path back. I think it's a very long path back that has to, like Alan's just said there, it has to involve, I think, not only winning games, but actually winning them convincingly.
Yeah, it really comes back to sort of what you've mentioned there, and it's a very tough one. Yeah, the board will naturally be keeping their finger on the pulse and keeping an eye on sort of the music within the support. I'm sure they'll be aware that quite a lot of people have been very cynical about Robson since the start of the season. Within the run that we're in, we've lost 2-0 up at Dingwall, and then 2-0 against Ayr, 2-0 against Dunfermline last week. But I think that's, and it was touched on in the post-match podcast by Duncan and Blair and Scott and yourself, Alan, that I think the difficulty is that when you look at the club media is now part of it, and it's such an easy thing to point towards and look at straight away, where you see an interview and you think, what's going to come here? Credit to Rafe TV again, because I think they do it in such a way that's respectful but still probing, and they still do the best out of trying to get managers out their shell, but there's only so much you can do. It's a tough one, because again, it's never nice to see anyone lose their job. Football cliche. Again, probably a Brian's gun one out there, Leslie, for you. But at the same time, I think it's one where if the crowds start to go, then the board are going to be forced into a position where it's very tough to sort of maintain this sort of the status quo and the direction. And if we're putting in performances where people are starting voting with their feet, certainly for me, I'm a season ticket holder, but want to get along to every game. It's just a very difficult place, and I think that's the thing going into this Saturday is it's hard to gauge what it's going to be like. I think that there is going to be that degree where people will probably be waiting to see what happens in the first instance. Look, we've seen instances where Rovers as a team have been on a good unbeaten run before, and yet we go up to a team that's maybe in poor form or it's going to be difficult. You think, that's going to be an easy game, and then maybe people are judging this one maybe we're the team that's on the other foot this time around. Who knows?
If the roles were reversed and we were on a really good run and Thistle were on a terrible run and they were counting us, we'd all be sitting there going, oh yeah, we'll be the team to beat, Garen bloody teed. I mean, we said that a few weeks ago about County and we were right, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I think that's the difficult thing. I think we've drawn the short straw by doing the pre-match podcast for this one because I don't like being overtly sort of negative about stuff, particularly about football, but at the same time there's so little evidence there on the last couple of games where just the performances haven't been there and you do naturally start to ask the questions. Alan, just to come back to you, what changes would you want to see? Not necessarily what ones that you think will happen, but what changes would you want to see if you were given the dugout position?
I'd match them up. Match this up. Go 4-2-3-1 or a variation thereof, and play wingers as wingers, and actually go for it and just try. Don't come out with some I genuinely can see us playing a back three and then Brown, Matthews, and Byrne again, and just trying it. I hope we don't, and I'm not sure. I mean, the reaction would not be good. Obviously, at 2:00 you would see the reaction on like it would just be like 20 pictures of Barry Robson with a kind of red circle with scored down. That'd be all the comments that you would see. But no, just go have a go. Go 4-2-3-1. But with that kind of solid back four, Byrne and Ian are in that kind of those two bits and let Easton and McMullen and whoever else you play with them loose. Let them have a go. And you know what? If we lose, so be it. We were probably going to lose playing with a back three and three defensive midfielders anyway. So at least lose having a bloody goal.
And Leslie, to come back to yourself, does the current situation maybe force a bit of a gamble? Do you think that Robson might be put in a position where he needs to sort of, it's kind of like the Gary Locke final game against Morton where we lose 1-0, but you're sort of seeing all sorts of strange manner of things going on where he throws as many people up front as he could. Or I'm guessing we're a little bit far off that, a little bit off that territory at the moment, not necessarily there, given we've still yet to kick a ball against Thistle at home. Maybe we're writing them off too early, but what are your thoughts about it? Would he be put in that position, do you think?
We're a bit away from nonsense like Bobby Barr playing as a centre half or whatever happened in Gary Locke's last game. We're a bit away from that yet. I do think, though, as I say, that he's been trying a lot of different things with the attack. He's been trying different players, different positions, different configurations. I do think, though, that we have to take a different approach defensively. And that can then run through the whole team. So, I was thinking about this, and what we had an awful lot of success with towards the end of last season was having Jamie Gullen and Finlay Pollock up top until Pollock got injured. And you're playing balls through. Pollock was latching onto them, and the other goals we were scoring with Pollock kind of going round the keeper and things like that. Scored loads of goals like that. You get the feeling that Paul McMullen was signed to do that job, except Paul McMullen's finishing has about 40 out of 100 on FIFA. So it's quickly become apparent that Paul McMullen can't do that, and that's fair enough because he's a winger, he's not centre forward. But you know who is quick, you know who is really good at one-on-ones, and you know who does have a track record of scoring a lot of goals like that is Callum Smith. So I'd be starting up top, I'd be starting Hamilton and Smith. So I'd be starting Smith in the more advanced position, with Hamilton sort of doing the Jamie Gullen job and the hold-up job. And then Easton and McMullen actually using wingers in their places. Byrne probably at the base of midfield. Matthews give him a free rein to get a bit further forward. And then I'd probably go with a back four with Stevenson, Hanlon, Fordyce, assuming he's fit, back in, and Doherty. I think Rowe, I can understand the logic of wanting to give somebody like J. Rowe game time and that he's going to need the games, but I do think he needs to be taken out the firing line for a bit. So I think if you start with a lineup like that, and you're actually putting in, I think Callum Smith is hopefully going to be fit enough to at least start a game. You can then bring Gentles on or whoever. We also, hopefully at some point Lewis Vaughan's going to come back. Hopefully he's going to come back as well. It would be magnificent if he was available, because that's another option you have there. But no, I think Callum Smith is actually probably the closest thing we have to replicating what we were doing with Finlay Pollock to such great effect last season. So that's what I'd be going with.
To clarify, that's pretty much exactly the lineup I'd go with.
That's
I
fine.
didn't fill in the rest of the spaces, so that's almost exactly pretty much what I would do.
Yeah, I think other than that, the sort of main changes would be, Darryl O'Connor came in, first game, nothing really jumped out about it. I think that we were playing so direct, it was hard to really get a gauge as to whether it's a performance that you... Callum Fordyce, I mentioned this quite a lot, it's a recurring theme on this podcast. I agreed with what was said about him, in particular in the post-match podcast against Dunfermline. He is a very, very good adept centre-back at playing the ball at the back. So yeah, I think that's fair enough. We will leave it for the preview for now. We'll skip on to something a bit more light-hearted. Well, I don't know. Leslie's in charge. Should McSphere, should Dargo. So is it 6 clues you've got, Les?
Yes, it is 6 clues. So, as always...
Hold on, I'm just a way to get my Encyclopedia Britannica out.
Okay, so 6 clues about a rover. Clue 1. I have started games as a left back, a right back, a deep line midfielder, a right midfielder, and a number 10.
So a left back, right back. What was the other ones?
A deep line midfielder, a right midfielder, and a number 10.
I'm going to go right off the bat, Mr. Utility himself, Scott McGill.
That's a good shout. It's a very good shout. I can't think of anything else to go with that. I can't better that. I'm just going to throw Lewis Gibson's name out there because why not?
Okay. So, clue 2. I was born 8 miles from my boyhood club, who I went on to sign my first professional contract with and make my professional debut for.
I don't know where he was born, but I'm still going to stick with Scott McGill.
I don't actually know I can't remember who he played with before us. He was at Hearts, wasn't he?
Who is Scott McGill? Yeah.
So he could have been born, I don't know what's 8 miles with Edinburgh. I'm fairly certain it's not Lewis Gibson, but I've got no reason to change it so far.
Okay. Clue number 4.
3.
3, sorry. Yeah, 3. Clue number 3. In the first league game I ever played, Regan Hendry was on the opposite team.
Oh. Scott McGill, I think he had a spell at East Fife, so it wouldn't surprise me if he was there when we had Regan Hendry, actually. So I'll stick with that. I'll stick with Scott McGill. I'm almost about bursting into tears missing Regan Hendry at this point, I should add.
I'm almost about bursting into tears missing Scott McGill. That's how bad our midfield's been for the last few weeks.
We've been brutal on this podcast, by the way. We've been so down on the Rovers. It's a tough state of affairs, but...
Yeah, I've got nothing to change my mind yet.
All right, clue. Actually, this is actually clue 4. In the biggest professional game had of my career. I marked Kaoru Mitoma, stopped him from scoring, and went on to win.
Did Scott McGill play internationally? I don't know, but I'm just going to run with it anyway.
I have no idea who that is.
Lad that plays for Brighton, is it?
He plays for Brighton and Japan. Lightning quick.
All of this is based off just that first clue. There's nothing else to suggest it's Scott McGill. Out of all the remaining clues, maybe clue 3, but yes, those positions.
I mean, now I know it's not Lewis Gibson, but I genuinely don't have another guess other than agreeing with Robbie that clue 1 does scream Scott McGill, but I don't. Yeah, stick with Lewis Gibson.
All right. Clue 5. Across my career, I have accumulated 28,488 points in air miles.
28,000.
488 points in air miles.
How many times can Scott McGill go to Peterhead on a plane? Need to be a seaplane, eh? I mean, I'm now convinced it's not Scott McGill, and I'm hoping that clue 6 is going to be a humdinger and an easy sort of tap-in, Brian Graham-esque. But I'll stick with Scott McGill to...
I'm starting to try to think of players who played internationals, and then I was like, oh, Willie Accio. It's like, yeah, Willie Accio didn't play as many games, didn't play 5 games for us, start 5 games, let alone 5 positions, so it's definitely not. Not.
Just being incredibly wrong. It's just...
Yeah, I've got nothing. Let's hit us with number 6.
All right. Clue number 6. I have 2 middle names. One has 2 letters, one has 3 letters.
Leslie, this is the polar opposite of a tap-in. This is what, shooting from 70 yards or something like that? Get cracking on a clue 7.
Okay, clue 7 then. My middle name is Li Hua.
Li Hua. Leslie, I think you might be the first ever person to win it based off, as the person asking the questions, because I'm clueless right now.
Clue 8.
I was going to say, I'm now kind of leaning towards Richard Chin, but I don't think he's played
ding.
in all of those.
Is it?
Ding. Yes, it's Richard Chin.
Oh, wow. Tremendous.
Right, so it's amazing. I mean, I didn't know any of this. I started doing the research, and I built this whole thing around the fact that I found out Richard Chin made his league debut against Forest Green when Regan Hendry was playing. I thought, well, that's quite cool. And then I found out, so he started at Charlton, and they started using him as a left back, then a right back, then they put him in midfield, and then we've started using him further up the pitch. And he played a full game at left back for Charlton when they knocked Brighton out of the Carabao Cup on penalties. And then everything else kind of follows on from there. So his first game was, the first league game was against Forest Green. And he's clearly been to Malaysia twice this year so far.
Yeah, I totally threw it stupidly. I was thinking of someone who'd played left back, right back, midfield, and right midfield intent for us. Not necessarily. And you probably didn't say that. You probably just said they've played in their career. You didn't but in my head it was they'd played in those positions for Rovers. Probably because it's Robbie's fault for throwing me away going with Scott McGill. That's what it is.
Yeah, my leading, it's a bit like in betweeners when they're sitting on the pub quiz machine just going Lee Sharp, Lee Sharp, Lee Sharp. Oh, it wasn't Lee Sharp, was it?
It was as soon as you went with the 2 and 3 minute, I'm like, that sounds like it's going to be someone of Asian origin, and that's when Richard Chin was the only one I could think of.
Yeah, fair play. So, if anyone has got that before clue 6, yeah, clearly shouting us up.
To be honest, I thought somebody was going to get it when I mentioned that he played against Regan Hendry, because effectively, if you're saying he's played against Hendry and it's not the Rovers, it's going to be down in England.
Yeah, I think we were both going. So they've played against Rovers when Henry was here.
I was still fully Scott McGill pilled at that point. So yeah, what a good should McStare should there go, but also
Absolutely.
a reminder that how much we miss both Regan Hendry and Richard Chin as well. I'm off to bed in a flood of tears. Like it's just it's not been the most positive, but fingers crossed. Like it's again, it's one where we've been in this position before. We're Rovers in a sense that we've been the team on the other end of it, where you go in a load of positivity into a game and then things can come unstuck. Fingers crossed. I really hope that he does. I know that it's the mood music is not the greatest at the moment, but we've got to hopefully end on a degree of positivity, and hopefully we can go out and if we do get a win, have something a bit more cheerful to chat about, because by God, that was just depressing nonsense from ourselves. So yeah, fingers crossed Rovers can give us something to cheer about on Saturday. Alan, hopefully you can get something to announce in the Tannoy box that's a positive.
It's been a while, eh?
And
get the call back on.
Back to being a bit more optimistic about life. But yes, as ever, thank you for taking the time to listen. We will be back with our post-match podcast at some point during the weekend. But yeah, as ever, bye for